Hey guys, welcome to today's video on the Vietnam War. A couple of reminders, we do have a slightly different format for notes today, so keep in mind I do expect that you watch the complete video. I also expect that you use headphones or you play sounds so you can hear my voice during the video. It's not enough to blindly copy some notes. And of course, pause and rewind as you need. You're going to go ahead and write our essential question down in your notes, which is how did LBJ, President Johnson, escalate or increase the war in Vietnam? That's what we're going to understand by the end of today's video. And so just to jump on in, the Vietnam War is a long conflict. It lasts a couple decades, and it is like a civil war between the north half of Vietnam and the southern half of Vietnam. And it's important to know that the US supported South Vietnam. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that on my notes just to kind of indicate things that are super important, and you can do that as well. What I'm also going to ask that you do is pause this video and label and color this map on your notes. So there are 4 key things to know, like where they are. Um, Vietnam is here, is pictured here, and I've got it labeled on the screen as well. So go ahead and label that for yourself. Pick a couple of colors and indicate where is North and South Vietnam, where is China, and where is the Gulf of Tonkin. All right, now that we've resumed our video after labeling where in the world we are, another key vocabulary word is called the Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong represents a group of South Vietnamese communists. They are a small group, and we'll get into what communism means here in a minute, but it's a small rebel group in South Vietnam that is supported by the North. And they help fight this, what's called the guerrilla war against South Vietnam. And what a guerrilla war is like surprise attacks that are being launched by these rebel groups. So the Viet Cong is fighting the guerrilla war. And really what that looks like is, thinking back to the pictures we looked at the start of class, like Vietnam is a very dense jungle, and there are lots of places to hide. And so this image here is actually a diagram of some of the underground like passageways and trenches that the Viet Cong would use. You can see here like there's some water and there's a little tunnel and there's a person, jumping in the water, swimming up this tunnel. And there's an underwater entrance. There's a couple trap doors and air vents, and it allows these people to move underground pretty much undetected. Definitely has that element of surprise. And so the question you're probably wondering is like, why do we get involved in Vietnam? This is a civil war happening halfway across the globe. Doesn't really seem like the United States is that affected. And so there's a couple reasons why we get involved. So the first is a vocabulary word called domino theory. And domino theory is the idea that if a certain ideology, a certain idea, which in this case is communism, if that takes over a country, it's going to spread like dominoes. It's going to knock down those dominoes and spread to other countries. That's a big vocab word in this unit, domino theory. I'm going to highlight it. I'm also going to ask you to draw it to help you remember in your notes on the left. But the idea here is if this idea takes root, it's not just going to take root in this one country. It's going to spread. It's going to affect others. And during this time in U.S. history, we are, as the United States, we are very concerned about communism, which could spread and gain popularity. And I know this is a long definition for communism. We are going to spend much more time in our next unit talking about what this means. But for now, just know that communism is opposite of capitalism. Communism is a government and financial structure that is very different than the United States. In communism, the government owns and controls most everything. That includes property, that includes the means of production, of making stuff. So the government has a lot of power. And because we are in opposition of communism at that time, we are invested in making sure places like Vietnam don't become communist. The tipping point for the United States is called the Gulf of Tonkin. crisis, or the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. And so while we are concerned about communism and we are involved in Vietnam, when we start to really increase our presence there and have it look like a traditional war, is an event where one of our ships, which was here in the Gulf of Tonkin, like really close to North Vietnam, one of our ships was attacked by North Vietnam. And so Lyndon Johnson uses that as an excuse to say, hey, we can't be passive anymore, right? We need to increase our military action in Vietnam because we're getting attacked there as well. Turns out years later, we've figured out that that probably didn't even happen. It's probably really unlikely that the North Vietnamese actually attacked us at all, but it was the justification used at the time. So definitely super controversial. It's kind of the pushing point that gets us into this war. And it's very likely that the North Vietnamese didn't do anything to provoke this attack. And so we're going to continue talking about like the realities of the Vietnam War, and we're going to do an activity that gets into some details. But 3 takeaways I want to start to end the video with is, this is a very difficult war. It's a war that we lose. We're not used to losing wars. And so 3 things that kind of show how hard this war was are pictured on the screen. And the first one goes back to guerrilla warfare, the diagram with the hidden trenches and the underwater tunnels, because this type of warfare where it's a small group versus an army allows the Viet Cong to use the jungle to their advantage, right? Really hide in the jungle and really blend in with the locals. And so what would happen is soldiers would find it really difficult to identify, who's friendly, who's a civilian, and who's the enemy. The media is also a huge player, and we'll continue talking about that next time, because this is the first war that is televised. This is the first time Americans are sitting in their living room, they turn on the evening news, and they see what is happening across the oceans, right halfway across the world, what is happening in Vietnam. The other key battle that we should be aware of is called the Tet Offensive. And the Tet Offensive is one of the turning points of this war, and it shows the United States that we are losing. The Viet Cong are winning battles. They are taking control over major cities in South Vietnam. And it showed us that victory was very far away. And so to wrap up today's video, we want to also recognize that the impact of the Vietnam War pretty much ruins Lyndon Johnson's presidency. He's a very popular president, right? He comes in after John F. Kennedy is assassinated. He starts the Great Society, creates so many civil rights changes, but it is Vietnam that takes him down because this war becomes so unpopular as it continues. It became so unpopular that Johnson pretty much gives up and says, I can't run for re-election. I will not win. And so I'm not even going to run. And this is a short clip of his speech.
With American sons in the field far away, with America's future under challenge right here at home, with our hopes and the world's hopes for peace and the balance every day, I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office, the presidency of your country. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Pretty incredible thing to say and do. He recognizes that he needs to spend 100% of his energy on this conflict. It's getting worse. People are dying. Thousands of people are dying every month, and he is not able to campaign for president at the same time. And so he says, that is it for Lyndon Johnson. And so as you reflect on this video, double check that you have done the things on the left-hand side. Hopefully you've marked up the right as well, highlighting a couple key points and drawing some images of some extra tough vocabulary. Then go ahead and tackle the written response in the box below, which is, when do you think that our president should be able to commit troops to conflicts and to war across the globe? So think about that. Give me a couple good sentences, and then move on to the next activity or choose your own adventure on the website. Thanks, y'all.